Spanish and Portuguese Jews are a distinctive subgroup of Sephardi Jews, descended mostly from Jews who were forcibly or coercedly converted to Catholicism in Spain and Portugal up until the expiration of the few months deadlines stipulated in the Spanish Alhambra decree and its Portuguese counterpart for the Jews to leave, convert, or face execution. A century after the Spanish and Portuguese decrees, many among the conversos started emigrating and settling throughout areas of Western Europe up until the 1700s, forming communities and formally reverting to Judaism. As a result of the unceasing trials and persecutions of both insincere and sincere Jewish origin New Christians by the Portuguese and Spanish Inquisitions, the early members of this distinctive community of Sephardic Jews consisted of persons who themselves, or whose immediate forebears, personally experienced an interim period as New Christians. The early community continued to be augmented by further New Christian emigration out of the Iberian Peninsula occurring in a continuous flow between the 1600s to 1700s. Jewish origin New Christians, as de jure Christians, fell under the jurisdictional powers of the Inquisition, but once they were in their new tolerant environments of refuge, out of both the Iberian cultural sphere and jurisdiction of the Inquisition, they were able to officially return to Judaism, the Jewish people, and open Jewish practice. As former conversos or the descendants of former conversos, Spanish and Portuguese Jews developed a distinctive ritual based on a melding of the remnants of the Judaism of pre-expulsion Spain which they had practiced in secrecy during their time as New Christians, influenced by the Judaism as practiced by the communities which assisted them in their readoption of normative Judaism, as well as by the Spanish, Moroccan and the Italian Jewish rites due to rabbis in Hasanum recruited from those communities to instruct them in ritual practice. A part of their distinctiveness as a Jewish group, furthermore, stems from the fact that they saw themselves forced to redefine their Jewish identity and mark its boundaries with the intellectual tools they had acquired in their Christian socialization during their time as New Christian conversos. Terminology. The main Spanish and Portuguese Jewish communities were traditionally in Western Europe, Italy and the non-Iberian regions of the Americas. In addition to the term Spanish and Portuguese Jews, this subgroup of Sephardic Jews is sometimes also referred to as a Western Sephardim, Spanish Jews, Portuguese Jews, or Jews of the Portuguese nation. The term a Western Sephardim is frequently used in modern research literature. Western Sephardim has been used to refer to Spanish and Portuguese Jews, but also Spanish Moroccan Jews, or, in some cases, both of these groups. Western Sephardim is sometimes occasionally applied to Greek and Balkan Sephardim when distinguishing all true Sephardim in general from Mizrahi Jews who are sometimes termed Sephardi in a broader religious non-ethnic definition which does not connote a genealogical link to Spain or Portugal. The use of the terms Portuguese Jews and Jews of the Portuguese nation in areas such as the Netherlands, Hamburg, Scandinavia, and at one time in London, seems to have arisen primarily as a way for the Spanish and Portuguese Jews to distance themselves from Spain in the times of political tension and war between Spain and the Netherlands in the 17th century. Similar considerations may have played a role for ethnic Sephardic Jews in the French regions of Bayonne and Bordeaux, given the proximity to the Spanish border. Another reason for the terminology of Portuguese Jews may have been that a relatively high proportion of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews had Portugal as their immediate point of departure from the Iberian Peninsula, even if most of these were of Spanish origin themselves just one or only a few generations back. Portugal issued its decree forbidding Judaism in the Portuguese state only some years after the expulsion from Spain. as the term Sephardim necessarily connotes a link with Spain. The distinguishing feature of Portuguese Jews, or Jews of the Portuguese nation, was the added link with Portugal. Thus, as a subset of the Sephardim, Portuguese, and Spanish and Portuguese, could be used interchangeably. Finally, almost all organized communities in this group traditionally employed Portuguese rather than Spanish as their official or working language. In Italy, the term Spanish Jews is frequently used, but it includes descendants of Jews expelled as Jews from the Kingdom of Naples, as well as Spanish and Portuguese Jews proper. In Venice, Spanish and Portuguese Jews were often described as Ponentine, to distinguish them from Levantine Sephardim from Eastern Mediterranean areas. Occasionally Italian Jews distinguish between the Portuguese Jews of Pisa and Livorno and the Spanish Jews of Venice, Modena and elsewhere. The scholar Joseph Dan distinguishes medieval Sephardim from Renaissance Sephardim, in reference to the respective times of each grouping's formative contacts with Spanish language and culture. Relation to other Sephardi communities. The term Sephardi means Spanish or Hispanic, and is derived from Sepharad, a biblical location. The location of the biblical Sepharad is disputed, but Sepharad was identified by later Jews as Hispania, that is, the Iberian Peninsula. Sepharad still means Spain in modern Hebrew. The relationship between Sephardi-descended communities is illustrated in the following diagram. Sephardim properly refers to all Jews whose families have extended histories in Spain and Portugal, in contrast to Ashkenazi Jews and all other Jewish ethnic divisions. However, Mizrahi Jews, who have extended histories in the Greater Middle East and North Africa, have often been called Sephardim more broadly in colloquial and religious parlance due to similar styles of liturgy and a certain amount of intermarriage between them and Sephardim proper. The main factor distinguishing Spanish and Portuguese Jews from other Sephardim proper is that Spanish and Portuguese Jews refers specifically to those Jews who descend from persons whose history as practicing members of Jewish communities with origins in the Iberian Peninsula was interrupted by a period of having been New Christians or Anasim. During their period as New Christians, many conversos continued to practice their Jewish faith in secrecy as best they could. Those New Christian conversos of Jewish origin who maintained crypto-Jewish practices in secret were termed Marranos by Old Christian Spaniards and Portuguese. Conversely, those New Christian conversos who have remained as conversos since that time, both those in Iberia and those who moved to the Iberian colonial possessions during the Spanish colonization of the Americas, became the related Sephardic Bnei Anasim. Sephardic Bnei Anasim are the contemporary and largely nominally Christian descendants of assimilated 15th century Sephardic Anasim, and are today a fully assimilated subgroup within the Iberian-descended Christian populations of Spain, Portugal, Hispanic America and Brazil. For historical reasons and circumstances, Sephardic Bnei Anasim have not returned to the Jewish faith over the last 5 centuries. In modern times, some have begun emerging publicly in increasing numbers, especially in the last 2 decades. For Spanish and Portuguese Jews, their historical period as conversos has shaped their identity, culture, and practices. In this respect, they are clearly distinguishable from those Sephardim who descend from the Jews who left Iberia as Jews before the expiration date for the Alhambra decree, resulting in the 1492 expulsion from Spain and 1497 expulsion from Portugal of all Jews who had not been baptized into the Catholic faith. These expelled Jews settled mainly around the Mediterranean basin of southern Europe, North Africa and the Middle East, namely, Salonika, the Balkans and Turkey, and they became the Eastern Sephardim and North African Sephardim respectively. Relation to Sephardic Bnei Anasim and Neo-Western Sephardim. The common feature shared by Western Sephardim to Sephardic Bnei Anasim and Neo-Western Sephardim is that all three are descended from conversos. Western Sephardim are descendants of former conversos of earlier centuries. Sephardic Bnei Anasim are the still nominally Christian descendants of conversos, and Neo-Western Sephardim are the increasing in number modern-day former conversos currently returning to Judaism from among the Sephardic Bnei Anasim population. The distinguishing factor between a Western Sephardim and the nascent Neo-Western Sephardim is the time frame of the reversions to Judaism, the location of the reversions, and the precarious religious and legal circumstances surrounding their reversions, including impediments and persecutions. Thus, the converso descendants who became the Western Sephardim had reverted to Judaism between the 16th and 18th centuries. They did so at a time before the abolition of the Inquisition in the 19th century, and this time frame necessitated their migration out of the Iberian cultural sphere. Conversely, the converso descendants who are today becoming the nascent Neo-Western Sephardim have been reverting to Judaism between the late 20th and early 21st centuries. They have been doing so at a time after the abolition of the Inquisition in the 19th century, and this time frame has not necessitated their migration out of the Iberian cultural sphere. Although Jewish communities were re-established in Spain and Portugal in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, largely with the help of communities of Spanish and Portuguese Jews such as that in London. These present-day Jews in Portugal and Jews in Spain are distinct from Spanish and Portuguese Jews, as, for the most part, the modern Jewish communities resident in Spain and Portugal also include other Jewish ethnic divisions recently immigrated to Spain and Portugal, such as Ashkenazi Jews of Northern Europe. In modern Iberia, practicing Jews of Sephardic origins, such as the Jewish community of Oporto, however, are also not Western Sephardim, but a Neo-Western Sephardim, as they were re-established in the 20th century and early 21st centuries with a campaign of outreach to the crypto-Jews of Sephardic Bnei Anasim origins. The Oporto community's return to Judaism was led by the returnee to Judaism Captain Artur Carlos de Barros Basto, known also as the Apostle of the Marranos. In 1921, realizing that there were less than 20 Ashkenazi Jews living in Porto, and that recent returnees to Judaism like himself were not organized and had to travel to Lisbon for religious purposes whenever necessary, Barros Basto began to think about building a synagogue and took initiative in 1923 to officially register the Jewish community of Porto and the Israelite Theological Center in the City Council of Porto. As mentioned, these communities of modern-day returnees to Judaism are among the first in the emergence of the nascent Neo-Western Sephardim. Neo-Western Sephardim are the modern returnees to Judaism throughout Iberia and Ibero-America emerging from among the population of Sephardic Bnei Anasim, and are distinct from Western Sephardim. Even more recent examples of such Neo-Western Sephardim communities include the Belmont Jews in Portugal, and the Xutas of Spain. In the case of the Xutas, the entire community of converso descendants was extended a blanket recognition as Jews by rabbinical authorities in Israel due to their particular historical circumstances on the island, which effectively resulted in a strict social isolation of the Xutas imposed upon them by their non-Jewish descendant neighbors up until modern times. In the last 5 to 10 years, organized groups of Sephardic Bnei Anasim have been established in Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and in Sfarad, Iberia itself, have also now been established. Some members of these communities have formally reverted to Judaism,